What level of improvement should the Dallas Cowboys expect from their 2021 draft class going into year two? And that plus more of your questions here today on the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Hi, I'm Landon McCool, and welcome to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Marcus Mosher, my normal co-host, is out on assignment, which is a nice way of saying that he's not going to be here today. That's just the general catch-all term we use there. Today, we are getting your questions in, and you had a ton of them, including what kind of improvements can the Cowboys expect from their 2021 draft class? Who are some tight end names that the Cowboys could potentially be targeting in the draft? And much, much more. So let's get right into it so we can get through a bunch of these questions. Hopefully, without Marcus today, we are going to burn through a ton of these questions. And I do think we should start where I just left off with a question on from Jones's Babysitter. Very excellent nickname. Jones's Babysitter asks, can you discuss some of the high and low end projections for the developments of last year's rookies? Specifically interested in thoughts on Jabril Cox, Kevin Joseph, and Osa. I think all three can make a big leap, and it already seems like the media is writing off Cox. Well, I think that you saw a little bit from each one of those guys, obviously kind of in reverse declining order. I mean, I think we saw a ton of Osa Odighizuwa early in the season through necessity. I mean, he had to get on the field early. They needed him to play a lot of snaps, a lot more snaps than I think that they anticipated before Neville Gallimore got injured in training camp. So I think that he got a healthy dose of it early on and had some development early on in his rookie year that probably wasn't expected for someone, as a third round pick, a defensive tackle. It's a difficult position to kind of transition into the NFL. So he got a lot of snaps early on, kind of hit a wall as the season went on, but also, as defensive tackle started to come back, didn't need to take the lion's share of the snaps anymore. I think that is really going to serve Osa well going into year two. All that experience, all that opportunity, he got a real taste for what it's like to play in the NFL. And I think that really helps with your training, your off-season training. You have an idea of what the goal is, what the standard is. And now you're kind of working towards that to try to get closer and closer to that. So I think that's all really good, anticipation for improvement from Osa Odighizuwa. Now, Jabril Cox and Joseph are a little bit different. They got less, work as the season went on. Well, not as the season went on, but they got less work than Osa overall last season. Joseph, as the season went on, actually got more work. It seemed like he was being folded in as injuries came in. He got more opportunity, and as he played well, even as folks started to come back from injury, he still continued to get some opportunities. Unfortunately, Jabril Cox, just as he was starting to get snaps on defense, got his injury and tore his ACL. So I anticipate both these guys taking big leaps next year, simply because they didn't get the number of snaps that Osa did in their rookie years. But I do think that those are positions that, once you get your feet wet a little bit, once you kind of have an idea of what you're doing, and then honestly, just once you have a full off season of being a professional football player and not having to worry about college and dealing with all that other stuff, all you're doing is working out. That's the reason that you see a large jump in a lot of these guys. And for people like Cox and Joseph, who are kind of physical freaks at their position, I think getting a little bit of knowledge on exactly how the game works in the NFL can really help improve things quite a bit. All right, let's see what's next. Do you see any notable free agents remaining that would be willing to accept a one-year pillow deal to play with Dallas? Matthew, Treader, Campbell, Fisher, Beasley. I think that this is why the Cowboys are probably waiting at this point, right? As we get into the, I don't know what stage you want to call this a free agency, but as we get through the kind of later stages of free agency, some of the markets for some of these top end guys start to get a little softer, and they start to kind of be more willing to look at, okay, what do I need to do to kind of help my market get better potentially next year. They start looking towards one-year deals as kind of a vaulting point to help get a longer term contract, hopefully in the future for them. So some of the names that were mentioned: Tyrann Mathieu, J.C. Tretter, Campbell, Fisher, Beasley. I think that these are all guys that are kind of in that area. They're all veteran guys. They're all looking to kind of have one more payday, or at least one more payday. And they may be. I mean, I don't know if all of those guys. I don't know if Mathieu and Tretter kind of fall into that category, but they may be getting closer to the point where they are willing to accept a one-year deal as kind of just a bridge between contracts. So I think the Cowboys are going to be. I mean, Wagner I think falls into this category as well, and I think that the Cowboys are interested in these kind of players. The question becomes, can the numbers get down to a place where it's within striking distance what the Cowboys want to pay for them? That's, I mean, if that's not the problem most of the time, I don't know what is. So I think there are definitely guys that the Cowboys would be interested in bringing, kind of for that sort of one year deal to sort of be a bridge for a more long term solution for the Cowboys, and like I said, be a vaulting point for those free agents to kind of help make themselves a little bit of money. Let's take a quick break so we can talk to you folks about Bet Online. After months of playing, college basketball has determined the top teams for the Final Four will determine this year's national championship this coming week. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. From the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it, BetOnline remains the best spot for all your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casinos. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the games start. All right, let's take some more questions. Like I said, we're going to try to get through a ton of these as we can. Texas _ Trill 12 asks, what tight end prospects are you most excited about coming into the NFL? This is very fortuitous timing, Texas Trill, because Marcus and I were doing tight ends this week. And it is interesting to kind of look at the class. I mean, it's a very interesting class. I think we've talked about the tight end class at different points throughout the podcast. There isn't that kind of name brand top end guy. I mean, even the folks that kind of have been bantied about early as being some of those top guys have kind of fallen off. I mean, I think obviously Weidemeyer is a guy that really comes to mind as someone whose pre-draft process has been lacking, I would say, as far as helping promote his draft stock. Right now, Marcus and I are looking at tight end Jelani Woods from UVA and Charlie Kohler from Iowa State. Please check in next week for those kind of deep dives on those players, and Weidemeyer is included in that as well. Jeremy Ruckert is a guy from Ohio State that I really liked watching his tape. Unfortunately, it looks like he showed up to his Ohio State pro day with a boot on, and so we don't really know what the status of him is yet. So we don't really know if he's going to be ready for training camp. We don't know what the injury is yet. So he's a guy that I really liked and I thought could be someone that potentially the Cowboys could use. The guy named Trey McBride from Colorado State is someone that I think has some upside as a receiver. I think, the Colorado State has had a lot of success in putting pass catchers in the league, mostly receivers, but I certainly would take a chance on someone like Trey McBride after watching his tape. It's an interesting class. There's guys, there's the guy from SMU, and this is terrible radio. I can't remember what his name is, but he, is kind of an older prospect. Actually had to retire from football for a little while due to some concussion issues. So there's definitely going to be something that needs to be checked out medically there that will to make sure that he's safe to be drafted, because I mean that's the thing that's really scary about those concussions is that it's the kind of thing that if you get one, a really terrible one, and if you had a series of them, that can be career ending almost right away. It's just like if you get a certain amount of them, there's a certain point where it becomes untenable. And I think there's a reason that this guy retired temporarily. His name is Grant Calcaterra from SMU. Like I said, a little bit of an older prospect, but that's because of the time where he took off for the concussions. If you get past the medicals on him, he has some pretty exciting tape. He is in SMU, obviously, so he's eligible for Dallas Day. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys were willing to take take a kick of tires on a guy like that. All right, let's scroll around some more. Pigskin prognosticator at Ben_Barth98 asks, are you nervous of Micah not being as effective with increased pass rush snaps? I think efficiency will go down and he won't be as effective. I think that's a reasonable fear. I think that's something that, if you look statistically at pass rush situations, that I think that everyone was kind of generally surprised with Micah Parsons' ability as a pass rusher. So anticipating a regression, I think that's a very normal, healthy thing. I don't know that it should be guaranteed, though. I think that there is a world where Micah spends more time as a pass rusher in the offseason, actually develops more skills there, and becomes an even better and more dangerous player. I think if you look at the fact that he didn't really get used full time or kind of even evaluated or trained as a pass rusher until a certain amount of weeks into training camp. I was actually there the day that it felt like he got pulled aside by some of the defensive ends, and Quinn was working with him on the side after practice, really kind of trying to hone some skills, and I think he spent some time on the side with Tyron Smith, just trying to kind of figure out what he's doing there. So I think that expecting regression for a guy that had success on limited pass rush snaps, I think that's totally reasonable. I also think it's totally reasonable to expect that he actually has improvement here because he's actually getting a full offseason to kind of work on this. Much like we talked about with some of these other younger guys, right? It's their first opportunity to really get to train full-time as NFL football players and not have to worry about college. Same goes for Micah in pass rushing. This is his first opportunity to really kind of spend some offseason time honing that and really working on it and improving there. So there's an opportunity that he could actually get better, I think, just as much as there's an opportunity for regression there. All right. Let's see what else we've got. Chris Copeland asks, who are the top 3 players in the first 2 rounds you want the Cowboys to avoid? I'm going to get buried for this, but I think we've talked about this before. I struggle with a certain type of pass rusher, and George Karlaftis, the player from Purdue, young player, very aggressive, excellent mindset. I struggle with the translation of his skill set into the NFL. He doesn't have exceptionally long arms. He's not exceptionally bendy. He has pretty good acceleration. He's a good athlete. There's no way around that. But he doesn't necessarily have the kind of translatable skills at the defensive end position that I like for guys, especially if you're drafting him in the first round. So he's a little scary for me. But again, like this could very well be my whole as an evaluation as an evaluator, more than Karlaftis, but he kind of generally scares me. I think that outside of that, I mean, I don't know that there's a ton of guys that I feel like are realistic that the Cowboys could take at 24 that I would be terribly upset with. I generally would say that I like Nakobe Dean, but he's of the list of guys that are potentials at 24. He's kind of near the bottom of that list. I just think that, an off-ball linebacker, he's incredibly instinctual, but it's just difficult when you don't have the level of requisite athleticism at that size to play the position. So he's a guy that I would probably be careful with. I can't really think of anybody else who, necessarily is like just a no-go for us at 24. I think, those are kind of the 2 that are just more of my personal preference, I guess. I think there's been some talk about drafting a corner, and outside of Stingley, I think that I would not love necessarily us drafting a corner just because I feel like it's a misuse of resources. You have a good secondary right now. There's lots of other parts of your team that could use a boost. I'm certainly, never going to poo-poo the idea of drafting the best available player, even if it's a position that you already have some strength at. But I think that the Cowboys are at a spot where, they're kind of in a window and they want to try to get as much talent to play right away or in the next year or so. So, kind of adding cornerbacks to an already crowded cornerback room, I think might be a mistake. So those are kind of the spots that I would look at. At Zach Pounds asks, if Kelvin Joseph is Kelvin Joseph going to be your starting CB2 when the season starts? I think they're going to give him every opportunity. I mean, they were going to give him every opportunity last offseason, because of injury situation. He didn't really get a chance to kind of do that. I think this year they will give him that chance. I think the really interesting question is Anthony Brown going to still be on the roster by the time that the training camp and potentially the season starts? He's due, I think, $5 million this year, and he played fantastic football last year. And let me be clear, I'm not condoning getting rid of him. I think that Anthony Brown is one of the reasons that you feel good about the quarterback room, is because that at the very least he provides a nice, comfortable floor for CB2. And at best case scenario, he's a very experienced and talented slot corner, while Kelvin Joseph is your outside guy. So I think that's really kind of where I'm looking at it now. Is are the Cowboys going to want to hold on to all these cornerbacks? I have no doubts that they're definitely going to be looking at Kelvin Joseph as CB2 to kind of start things out in training camp. They may make him earn that a little bit, but I don't imagine that it will be a very difficult competition to kind of get him into a situation where he's rotating with Brown and then eventually kind of taking over that job, before training camp. Mr. Valejos says, from @GirlDad88, big hypothetical if. How would Kyle Hamilton fit in Dallas if he fell? Well, I mean, I think exactly how Kyle Hamilton would fit in Dallas if he fell. He would be very similar to the way that you use Curse. It's one of those things where he's definitely a lot more probably versatile just because of his processor speed. He can play in the back end if you needed him to. I think more than Curse. But I think that how he would fit in the Cowboys, locker room would be a very similar situation to what you see with Curse, right? Lots of covering tight ends, lots of playing in the box. Their skill sets are similar, except I think, Curse maybe is a little less expanded than what you can expect out of Kyle Hamilton. So I think that that's kind of similar type of usage that you should expect if that were the situation. I just wouldn't hold my breath there. I would not expect that Kyle Hamilton ends up falling to the Cowboys, even despite him running that 4.7. I think he's too talented of a player. I mean, it certainly can happen. Like we talked about, anything can happen in the NFL draft, but I'm just not anticipating something like that. All right, guys, we need to take a break to talk about Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is impossible to find your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Rock Auto has everything from engine control modules and brake parts, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. Best of all, prices at rockauto.com are always reliably low, and the same for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Why spend up to twice as much for the same parts? Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, let's get through a couple more questions before we get out of here. I'm trying to peel through as many of these as possible. Let's take a Bobby Wagner question. It's still kind of floating around in the media. At PKEHOE82. Pokeho 82? I don't know. Looks like they have a NFT as their PvP. So is Bobby Wagner a fit with us at $11 million for 1 year based on cap? Well, I mean, I think that there is certainly a way that the Cowboys can arrange that so in such a way that it's not going to be so murderous on their cap. I mean, they could probably even put in a void year if they wanted. And honestly, Bobby may want to sign more than a 1 year deal, if that's what he's looking for. It's kind of hard to get a read on what his market is right now. I mean, he left Los Angeles. He went to Baltimore for a visit. I think that there's teams that want him, and I certainly think that there are teams that are willing to pay him that much money. I think the question now becomes, what is he looking for? Is he looking for another huge payday? Is he looking for an opportunity to kind of vault him into another free agent deal like we talked about with some of these other folks? I certainly think that Bobby Wagner still can play good football. I certainly think that he has the ability to still go out there and be a leading tackler in the NFL, and certainly is going to be an incredible influence in the locker room. So I think that all of those things make him a good fit, especially with someone like Michael Parsons. It would be fantastic to have a role model like Bobby Wagner in that locker room. I think those are all reasons that he's a good fit. I think that the level of versatility that you're going to be able to get out of a player like Bobby Wagner in your defense, because you're going to be able to move Parsons around, I think it can make it worth that much money. The question is whether the Cowboys can be competitive in free agent and that's free agency, and that's kind of really where we are with this. Is, are they going to be able to make an offer, or will they be willing to make an offer that will be something that's competitive with the other teams that are in Bobby Wagner's orbit right now, trying to get him to join their team. All right, a couple more questions, and then we're going to get out of here. It sounds okay from Corey at Cowboys for Life. It sounds more and more like Pollard is going to take on more wide receiver responsibilities this year. Talk about that, what the offense would look like with Pollard in the Debo role. Now, I think we should caution against folks from kind of one-to-one comparing what Pollard potentially might do as the Debo role, because, again, that just sounds like the typical chasing the dragon on the hottest trends in the NFL of offense. I think, the idea in general is that, what Debo Samuel does is he provides an easy button for Jimmy Garoppolo. And we've talked about this ad nauseum since the offseason, right? The Cowboys need to do a better job of making the job easier for Dak Prescott. They need to get the ball to some of their playmakers early and then let their playmakers use their yards after catch ability to kind of create yardage instead of requiring Dak to make difficult throws in order to move the ball down the field every single time. And so what Pollard will do is, look, just to go into this really quickly, if you don't have the kind of history there, Pollard was basically just a slot wide receiver at Memphis in college. So he has experience there. The things that I'm hearing from folks is that the Cowboys are very, very interested in getting him more involved in the passing game, almost like a third receiver in the passing game. So a huge uptick in snaps, which is, I think, well-deserved if you saw what he was able to do last year on limited opportunities. So I would imagine that what you see is, him taking more snaps as a wide receiver. They may need to kind of compensate for that by bringing in another running back to kind of take away some of the secondary snaps if they need to, away from like Ezekiel Elliott with another running back. I think what you'll see is, underneath stuff, they'll try opportunities to get Pollard down the field. I think with some of his speed, I don't know that he's going to be like a deep threat, but I think that you can run him from the slot deep down the field, and I think he can catch over the shoulder if he needs to. Kind of in and out of his breaks sort of thing, screens, reverses. I think these are all things that you should look for with Pollard. Getting the ball to him quickly and on the move, those are all things that I think will be very appealing to him. And then just kind of to flip side this, I think we'll also see an uptick on the usage of how they move around CeeDee Lamb. I think you'll see more CeeDee Lamb in the backfield. Those are all things that, if you're looking for kind of a Debo Samuel comparison, I think, several different of these players will likely do things that are kind of outside of the normal role of their position, right? CeeDee Lamb and Pollard kind of blending that line between running back and wide receiver. And I think that that's, going to be an opportunity to kind of get people in better position to get open, not being so static with where everyone's lining up. These are things that I think that Kellen Moore is interested in using more formational stuff, using different personnel groups in different ways, in interesting different ways. So I think these are things that Kellen Moore is interested in, that we're going to see an uptick of. And it won't just be Pollard. I just think Pollard is the guy who's probably going to benefit the most this season with an increase in touches. Let's do one more question, and then we will kind of get on our way. Okay. From Herbert the Hamster at Julian at Night. Do you think the Cowboys traded Amari too early and would have gotten interest in better draft picks from the other teams after Devontae Adams and Tyreek traded, knowing the Chiefs are looking to trade for a number one wide receiver? I honestly, and I've seen this kind of on Twitter at several different times from folks, and this kind of belief system that the Cowboys could have gotten more for Amari Cooper. I just don't see any evidence of that. I think there are some folks out there that think that Jerry, like because Jerry let it be known to the media that we're potentially looking to release him or trade him, that somehow drove down his value. I don't see how that's possible. I don't think that anybody that heard. I don't believe that any of the NFL teams heard exclusively from the media that Cooper was available and potentially not going to be on the Cowboys this year. I think we are always the last folks to know relative to NFL teams and ownership and front offices. Look, the Cowboys clearly decided last season, we said this multiple times, the Cowboys clearly decided last season when they didn't touch Cooper's contract for a restructure. They clearly decided that they were probably going to move on from him at some point and get rid of that contract number because they didn't feel comfortable with it. I think what actually happened is the COVID situation bringing the salary cap down to a point where that money that was lost in the salary cap reduction that was a result of the COVID seasons was probably just about the amount of money that the Cowboys had slotted for Cooper and holding on to that contract. So I think once they lost that money, it kind of made that contract decision a little bit easier. Look, say what you will, the Cowboys seem to have been pretty adamant that they had concerns about some effort stuff, whether it's, and look, part of that could be just spin in the media, but I also think that if we're being honest with ourselves, these were questions that Cowboys fans were asking at different points during the last season. So, I don't think that getting rid of Cooper was something that they would have done in a vacuum necessarily. But when you talk about the price point that he was getting for the next 2 years, you talk about the production that he put up on the field last year. You've got CeeDee Lamb, who's already your number one wide receiver. I think that it was pretty clear that the Cowboys were going to be moving on from Cooper. So the teams weren't going to trade for that contract because I don't think that most teams believe that Cooper is necessarily worth that contract. And I think that's indicated by the fact that no one was willing to trade more than a fifth round to get this contract. It wasn't like such a bargain that people had to throw draft picks at it in order to entice you away from it. I think the Browns offered something which was more than a cut, and the Cowboys got something when there probably was not much to be had there. Again, I think that we need to remind ourselves that trades are not just about the player. It's about trading for the contract that the player is on. And I think that if you look around the NFL, despite all the big money contracts that are being handed out, I don't know that the rest of the NFL thought so highly of Cooper's contract that they felt like they had to trade for it, that they couldn't get away. They couldn't pass up an opportunity to get such a deal on his contract. And I think Cleveland was just willing to not have to fight the free agent market for Cooper and get the money as it is instead of having to sign a potential longer term contract with maybe more money on the back end eventually. So that's it for us today, guys. Thank you guys for joining me today. Make sure you check us out wherever you get your podcasts. We're always free and available. Make sure you check me out at McCoolBCB. Make sure you check out Marcus Mosher as well at Marcus at Marcus _Mosher. And until next time, happy trails, everybody.